And I'd like to welcome you all to our Anti-Racist Book Club. And I would like Wendy Rhodes to introduce our convener and our leader for this evening.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. And I want to welcome Tanny Prell-Epstein back to Macomb Salel Lakeside. You may have already met Tanny. She shared her Jewish journey with us during MLK weekend. And I assume that some of you were at that gathering. It was a great presentation. She hit it out of the ballpark. So we asked her back on July 12th, where she did an adult enrichment session where she reflected on the moment that we were in. Tanny, we know that Tanny works at the Art Institute, but when she's not working, she is very active in the work of the URJ around diversity, equity, and inclusion. She was a fellow in the first Adjuvenation Fellowship. She now serves on the North American board of the URJ, and she has participated on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Lay Structures Task Force. She also facilitates a lot of DEI training. So we are so fortunate to have Tanny here with us today to lead us through a discussion of Between the World and Me. So with that, Tanny, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wendy, for the introduction, Macomb Salel Lakeside for having me. I am just so fond of your congregation. Oh my goodness. Every time I get to be with you all, it's wonderful. So thank you for having me for this very important book club. I was so excited when Vanessa and Wendy reached out about it. Thank you, Vanessa. And heard that you were reading this book, and the timing could not be better, if you ask me. So I would just love, just as a little way for us to get to know each other, and this is just in the chat, so at the bottom, when we go to the bottom of your screen, little chat box, if everyone would be willing to share why you chose to be a part of the Anti-Racist Book Club. There's so many book clubs, but there's something really special and unique about joining an anti-racist book club in particular. Just the title has its own responsibility and its own special meaning. So just what brought you to joining the Anti-Racist Book Club? So if everyone could put their answer in the chat, just so we can get to know each other a little bit, that would be wonderful. And so while people are writing their responses, whatever you're comfortable with, fabulous. Thank you, Vanessa, for starting us off. My hope for us tonight in terms of our goals, that we're really able to explore the world and me through a Jewish lens. And so we'll talk about the book and then think about how it relates to us as Jews and as Americans, and what that relationship is like. And then to really gain a better understanding of an author whose life and experiences really reflect those of so many Americans. And then for Black Jews, those intersections are there as well. So it's not, his experiences aren't an experience separate from, but also intertwined within the Jewish world as well. So some goals for tonight. And then just as some norms, and thank you so much for these responses, this is wonderful. So just some norms for tonight, just because anytime we talk about race, it's a really vulnerable thing. And in order for us to just be able to have the most meaningful conversation possible, just some agreements for us is that when speaking, if you could please use I statements, so talk about your own experiences and only speak for yourself. And in a similar note, recognize that we're all coming into this conversation from different experiences. We've lived different lives, and we're bringing that richness to the conversation. I love this one, that we're soft on people, we're humans, so we're hard on ideas. So if you have things that you disagree with, that you want to bring up, soft on the person, but feel free to bring up different ideas in this space. And then just monitoring how much you're giving to the conversation, stepping up. If you haven't said anything, please know that this is a space where we would absolutely love to hear you. And if you feel like you've been one of the first ones to talk, stepping back during various times. And so if there's anything else, any other just norms and agreements that you feel like would make the conversation run even more smoothly, feel free to unmute and share. Read in some of these. This is great. Everyone has just such wonderful reasons why they came to this book club. So thank you all for sharing. So if no one has any other agreements, then we can just jump right into our conversation. So to just jump right in to the book as a whole, there's so many ways that this book could be read. So it could be seen as an exploration of the African-American experience. It can be seen as a sharing of the Black American male experience, the experience of growing up in urban America. It could also be read as a book about raising a child or about being a child. So of all of the different ways that we could read Between the World and Me, which ways of reading the book really resonate the most with you? And feel free to unmute and share. And I'm gonna put this in the chat as well.
All right, I'll unmute then. To me, it resonated almost all of those different things. It was the story of a father learning how to raise a son, but under such unusual circumstances also, being Black and the perils and the hardships of raising a child who's Black, when in the Black community, and just filling his son in on the history and his life. I was so moved by it. I was moved in so many different ways. There were parts of it that I just wanted to cry. I just wanted to break down and cry, because it's so sad that that a Black person has to be so worried about their son going out. And we realize as we sit here in our white skin that it's so hard for us to feel what that must be like. And so I wanted to weep. I was weeping at times. So I'm going to stop for now. Let somebody else talk.
Thank you for sharing that. Go for it, Wendy.
Okay. This is the second time that I read the book. And the first time when I read it, I just absorbed it as a Black American parenting letter. So a letter about the talk. But when I read it the second time, it was so deeper, so much more rich. There were so many themes. And maybe it's because I read it first in 2015 and I read it the second time in 2020. The notion that he could pack, seemed to me, all of the themes in this tiny little book. It's just very, very powerful.
Yeah. And Wendy, can you elaborate for us, for those who might not know, what the talk is?
The talk is, well, I'm white and I understand the talk to be something that, I first learned about the talk when we went as a URJ group and we were in St. Louis, and we heard a panel of parents from Ferguson outside of St. Louis. And the talk is familiarly what is referred to as what Black parents have with their children when they're young, to prepare them. So Tanny, please correct me, to prepare them for when they're out, that they may be pulled over by a cop. They may need to behave in certain ways. It's just like providing their children with a protective shield so they're prepared, is how I understand it.
Yeah, beautiful explanation, Wendy. Thank you. And definitely, I think when you first mentioned that it's an elaborate talk that this letter is to his son in many ways. Anyone else?
I also read it, I guess maybe 4 years, not 5 years. And I felt bad. He kept listing all the names of these people. And I remember Trayvon Martin and, of course, Michael Brown. But the rest of the people, and, you know, obviously now we had George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, but I didn't know who those other people were. And now there's just more and more names.
Absolutely. And that's one of the many reasons I thought that reading this right now is so timely. It was written, you know, 6 years ago, and those names had already been around for quite some time. And I feel like, especially in the conversation right now, it's some people forgot that those names were a part of the narrative, and when you don't get to grow up without them being part of the narrative. Yeah, go for it, Sue.
Well, I got on mute first. But okay, so I had just started the book to join this discussion, but listening to you, I will say that today we look at this book differently. 4 years ago, we did not have the history of this summer. 4 years ago, we did not have this happening across the country. And what to me has happened is the validity. He was always valid. He's a person, he's writing a personal account, so that is valid. But to me, in light of all of the happenings, it has ratcheted it up how pervasive this is all over the country and to everybody. And let me just give you just what happened 2 days ago in our neighborhood. So I live right near the temple in Highland Park. We've been here 50 years. There's a store right near me that sells flowers. So I went into the flower part of the shop, fruits and vegetables and flowers. I went in, and there's a really young woman who works there, who's an African-American young woman. And she has been there designing in their floral department. So I've known her since she came in just a few months ago. And so I said to her, I don't know, just kind of off the cuff while I was waiting for her to finish for something for me. I said, so how are you managing you coming here to Highland Park on a lot of different levels? She said, oh, I can't even tell you how difficult it's been. First of all, there's a different clientele here. I said, but what about your safety? I know the clientele, but what about your safety? I don't know where you live. I didn't even ask her. She said, I will tell you that I have been stopped daily, no matter what route I take. If I come up Sheridan Road, if I come up the highway, no matter where, I am stopped daily to ask. I drive a nice car. I'm a Black young woman. I'm going to, where are you going? It was so shocking to me. I mean, I know this occurs. I know that, I know this occurs, but to hear it from her, if you can tell, I'm getting all red, I'm flustered, my blood pressure is through the roof. But this is just one example right here. I can't even find the right words because it is so upsetting on so many levels. And I'm so apologetic, and I don't even know what to say, except that she has to know I really cared, because I was almost in tears. And just even recounting it, I'm still almost in tears. Because I don't know how to apologize for such an assault to her dignity.
Yeah, well, I think, Sue, the fact that you had that conversation, that you brought it up, that you said that you cared, that you asked how she was. I don't know if she's getting asked that all the time. And so the fact that you had that conversation and is just huge. And to your point, there is so like this has always been happening, but this summer really put it in they got the media attention that it's never received before in this same way. And so it's a call to action in such a different way. And so like the reflection part, and it's beautiful that you want to apologize. And I think like the biggest thing is the action and figuring out what to do from here. So, but I'm so glad that you had that conversation with her, because that bridge building piece is huge. And that's where it all starts, is in the conversation. So I'm so glad. So for our next question, thinking about just like some of the themes. So Coates talks about the dream throughout the book. It is sewn through everything. So for Coates, what was the dream to him? And like when we're thinking about the dream, like who was it that had access and who didn't have access to the dream? And is this concept a familiar one to you? And then thinking about this Jewishly, as an American Jewish community, how does the dream relate and function for the American Jewish community in particular? Just thoughts on the topic of the dream. And I have some other follow-up questions. This is page 11, if you're following along. So any other questions that speak to you?
Okay, so the dream is definitely the American white, it's the white dream of being white and being privileged in this world. And as Jews, we know prejudice, as many other minorities do, but we still present white, and we don't have to, our Judaism doesn't always show through. Being Muslim shows through. Being Black shows through. Being Jewish and white, we still have the prejudice in the Jewish part, but we're still white and we're still privileged. And we can still walk in any store, go to any place, and not be questioned about why we're there. And having that Black skin, you're always going to be questioned if you're in the wrong place. Why are you here? What are you doing here? You don't fit in here. And I just can't imagine that kind of prejudice. And it does make me sad. And to what you were saying before about, our awareness now of this issue, it's so much in the media right now. I mean, this problem it's a 400-year-old problem that we're finally really coming face to face with. For maybe one of the first real times in our life, people really seem to be reacting to this. And hopefully through this, we can have change. That's my hope.
Mine too. And to follow up on your point, just this idea of who belongs in what spaces, and that these spaces were created with race in mind. And we can return to this question, but I think what you brought up was a really key part of the book. It was the very beginning of the book when on page 7, Coates said, but race is the child of racism, not the father, and suggesting that, racism precedes race, and without racism, we wouldn't have need that designator of race. And so if anyone had any additional reactions to that part of the book and this understanding of racism being the thing that created race itself.
I have to say, I think that's really interesting, and it's interesting how one category can become another, right? And these sort of lines in between. I mean, you may have seen there was a book, gosh, I don't know, I was a young rabbi when I read it, How Jews Became White People, right? Which is a really fascinating kind of story. I mean, it goes to what you were saying, that racism precedes race, and so there certainly was a time when AACP was not for African Americans; it was for African Americans and Jews, and and other people who were considered in those days. And now, obviously, that we've what do we call that? Code switching, right, or something? So we've Jews have many Jews, who are not perceived of as being Jews of color anymore, right? When 50 years ago they were, maybe a little more.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. And yeah, that was definitely something that was touched on quite a bit in the book, is that this transition into being a part of the dream and those who hold the dream, and that transition into whiteness as a perceived category. Hi, Nancy.
Hi. Anyway, one of the things that I think I did not realize, and I grew up in Hyde Park, so it's interracial and all that kind of stuff, but we didn't talk about that stuff. It's just the concept of race is a fallacy. And Coates points that out. And I went to the African American Museum of History and Culture. And when you go down to the lower level, they talk about how race was almost created as a way to define people. If you are Black, you're going to be lazy, you're going to, God only knows what, all sorts of things. And it's really, it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And, but I think to understand what race means, they used to talk about the Jewish race or the Italian race or whatever. Well, I'm not sure we are a race, but race is in fact a construct. And to understand that is to at least move a little bit closer, I hope, a little bit closer to understanding that this has extraordinary meaning the way our culture has defined it. But how can we break through that and make sure that race, all the stereotypes. I was just reading Henry Louis Gates post some things to Facebook and about the Birth of a Nation. All of the stereotypes. Oh, it's horrible. It's just absolutely horrifying are in there. So I'm going to stop there because I'm not sure I have much more to say, but I think that is something that I didn't realize because it's been part of the culture, part of my education, part of what people talk about, race. And I think we need some way move away from that and understand what it means. Okay, I'm done. I'm going to mute myself.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you. You bring up a great point, Birth of a Nation. One of our nation's first movie, our first blockbuster hit, Birth of a Nation, which, if you haven't seen it, it gives a very interesting insight into the construct of race in our country. And that was one of the things that Coates brings up, is that racism, this idea that people already had about differing groups of people, specifically Black people, and what they wanted Black people to be and function as in this country, that we had the media that also feeds into it. And Birth of a Nation is just like a perfect example of that. And you see so many of the stereotypes that carry through history are just birthed in that, through that movie. Excellent example. Hi, Laura.
Hi. There was a part where Coates wrote, "White America is a syndicate arrayed to protect its exclusive power to dominate and control our bodies. Sometimes this power is direct, lynching, and sometimes it is insidious, redlining. But however it appears, the power of domination and exclusion is central to the belief in being white, and without it, white people would cease to exist for want of reasons." And the whole concept of a Black person's desire to be able to control their own body, what comes along with being in a body, having a body, existing, taking up space, was a theme that I found extremely striking throughout the entire book. And just this idea that if I can create something separate and say I'm white, then that means that you can be something else, and then I can judge you, or I can separate you, or I can control you by defining who you are because you're not me, or you're not like, white people. And that is something I think one of the parts of the book that I was the most struck by was this quote that came where, sorry, I'm looking, I read it on my Kindle, so I'm going through, the author wrote, Tolstoy, he was quoting someone, Wiley, Tolstoy is the Tolstoy of the Zulus. And to me, that was such an incredible statement to say, it is not white people, it is not the dream, and then Black people and Black people's experience. Like, Tolstoy is Tolstoy. Like, he's not ours, he doesn't have a race, like, he is everyone's, and all of the amazing people in history are everyone's. In our history, Tolstoy is the Tolstoy of the Zulus. And that was something that was so striking to me, was this idea of that otherness that exists, and like, what can I do to try to, like you said, build a bridge between that.
Beautiful. That is absolutely it's such a striking theme throughout all of it. And because so many of these ideas that we have, where it's like, our education system is racist in these various ways, our healthcare system, like all these systems that we talk about, or redlining, like it can all be so academic. And then when you put it all into a body, that like, these are things that impact individuals, these are humans. And he goes into those specific examples as well, that like, it wasn't just a group of people, like these were mothers who had dreams for their kids. That it happened in these actual bodies. Like, it does absolutely put this extra meaning and weight to it. So great example, Laura. Thank you for sharing. And if anyone else has any just parts of the book that really struck you that you'd like for us to talk about, please bring them in. So Laura, thank you. 'Cause that's such a great quote from the book.
I was also struck by how many times he said, in control of my body, in control of your body, your body, your body, your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to just hear how that struck you. Or anyone. Nancy, go ahead. You need to unmute.
Unmute. Okay, there it is. I think part of it is that most African Americans who were brought to this country did not have control of their bodies, or their lives, or their children, or their whatever. And then I think that concept that it's very sad, it's very tragic, and it's very awful, and it's something that we need to live up to. But that was my sense of your body. Your body matters because you are viewed in a certain way. You're viewed as as a slave, as an African American, as someone who does not have the same, someone wrote to me on Facebook, the same, what did he say? Same clout. And it's really something that we have to, I really think we have, I never thought about reparations that much because I didn't know how we're going to do it. But I think having reparations some way or another is a way of acknowledge that we all, whether we came in, one part of my family came in 1756 and one part of my family came at the end of the 20th, at the beginning of the 20th century. we all have responsibility. We all benefit from what the racist community, what racism has benefited for us. We suffered, as Jews, we suffered persecution. We still do. But I think the idea that confronting this is really important to me. And it's happened to me in the journey since I last had, since I took my glasses off, I can't read it anymore. But anyway, since Tari made her presentation, Tani made her presentation at So Well, I have made such a journey, and I didn't even know I had to go on this journey. But it's very important.
Man, I'm so glad you're on the journey, and I hope it's been a really meaningful one. And so glad you brought up reparations, because Coates wrote an entire article called "The Case for Reparations." So if you hadn't yet had the chance to read it, it's so interesting, and especially after having just read this book, because it goes so much into the history of it. So Nancy, great plug. I don't know if you knew that he wrote that, so you had a really good intro to that. So thank you. And
I
then,
did know that he wrote about that. And
oh, you're muted.
sorry, I'm muted. It's one of the things I've been following in many of the books I've been reading, and I've been really fascinated because I thought I was woke. I thought I knew what was going on, but just the confrontation with our history happening right now is extraordinary. And I hope it leads to something really, really important in how our culture works and how people are seen as part of part of us. Okay, I'm going to be quiet.
Thanks, Nancy. Mary, would you like to share?
Well, this is, I would consider myself now woke as well. Being raised in Waukegan, my neighbors were a combination of white, Hispanic, and Black. That's, and I grew up, they were my friends. I did not view them in a racist way, but in a different culture. I went over to my Hispanic friends and had, tacos. We heated the tortillas on the stove top. We, it was, and I feel looking back on it, how naive I was. They lived in a house like we lived in a house. They lived, it was the same. There wasn't a difference. And so, but I look, but after reading this book, I look back and, Yvonne and Sonny would always be dressed well and behave well. And it's like, why? Well, because of what they faced, but I did not know that. I just admired them and I looked up to them because they always behaved so well.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. And there's so much there, and that's because so much of the way that our white, the way that white supremacy works, that it's like so much is meant to just remain invisible that we don't see it, and especially as kids, that we're able to just exist in many ways, but that many people are able to just exist. And that's kind of where the dream part comes in, that until you're knocked out of the dream, or if you've never been a part of the dream and how that functions. So Mary, thank you for bringing in your personal example. Welcome to our new visitors. Thank you for being here. So we've just been talking about the book, and so this is a great opportunity. So I'll pop in another question, and if we haven't heard from you yet, would love to hear your thoughts. So thinking a little bit about on page 69, Coates says that the struggle in and of itself has meaning. And so I was I would just love for us to discuss what do you think he's talking about when he refers to the struggle, and bringing it in Jewishly. So Israel means to struggle with God. And do you think that this is the same type of struggle that Coates is referring to, or is it a different kind of struggle? And just like, what is the meaning of struggle as it functions in this book in particular? And there's a lot of different directions where this could go. And just thinking about every part of Coates's life, whether it was him as a kid in Baltimore or when he was a college student at Morehouse, and just the way that we think of struggle, how Coates brings up struggle. And then for our new people who are joining as well, I've encouraged anyone that if there were parts of the book that you thought were really interesting or things that brought up questions for you that you'd like for us to discuss as a group, would love to hear that. Mary?
Well, the struggle is so many-faceted, many-sided. He had the struggle of just surviving his own streets among his Black brothers and other boys in the neighborhood. The struggle of what happens when a police officer stops you, what happens when the white woman that pushed his son, so life is every moment of his life, and he expects it of his son as well. Every moment is going to be a struggle to find the balance, to not fall off the tightrope, to just be able to survive.
Absolutely. Thank you. Laura?
One of the explorations of struggle in the book that I was the most struck by was when Coates described just wanting to read as much as he could about all these different Black people's perspectives, and how he found that so many of them contradicted. And the story of I think it was a Nigerian queen, and how she didn't have a seat, and so she had someone come on all fours so that she could sit on that human chair, and how he originally, at first thought that this was such an incredible thing. She is powerful, she is making a seat for herself. And then through reading, and I might be mistaken, but my interpretation of it was like, by reading all these different views and experiences, he came to see like, wait, what if I'm more like the human chair than the Nigerian queen, And so for me, I really was very moved by his own struggle to figure out, like, who am I? I'm a Black voice, I'm a voice. Who do I identify with when all these different geniuses have all these different concepts of identity? And how does that change, as you move between different chapters of your life?
Amazing example. Thank you. And that connects to another really huge theme in the book, which was education. And so, like, as you were saying, like, Coates loved learning, like he absolutely loved learning, but his time growing up in Baltimore, there was such a distrust of the schools that he was a part of. So I was just wondering what your all thoughts were on Coates' experience with the education system early on and how it compares to your understandings of the ways that our schools work and function. So just the education piece of it all, if there was anything that resonated with you.
One thing that resonated with me was, and I know I listened to the book and I listened to the last part most recently, but when his how he was affected by the death of his friend Prince Jones, and this is what he looked like, you know, handsome guy, and when he went to go visit his mother, and Coates said, "Did you want him to go to Howard?" And he kept calling it the Mecca all through the book. And the mom said, "No, I wanted him to go to Harvard. And if not Harvard, Yale, if not Yale." And so, you know, I was thinking about all of that. And I don't know why, if it was the last thing I read or he saved it till the end, I don't know. But that just hit me. And also, you know, going to Howard and how that is the Mecca.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vanessa.
Annie, if I could add to that, I know I spoke earlier, but the whole notion of Howard, and this summer I've really learned a lot more about Howard. We had a speaker at a virtual mitzvah day, Lauren from Glenbrook North, who was heading off to Howard, and then Kamala Harris went to Howard. So it really is considered on the level of Harvard. And it's just so interesting, the culture, and it truly is a Mecca. And it just appears to be a really extraordinary institution, and just how it helps lift up Black students in amazing ways. So I love that he included that whole discussion of Howard in there. It was good to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Nancy? Oh, and you're muted.
One of the things that was disturbing on that level is that Howard is the Black Harvard. And I remember when my kids, who are now grown and gone, and neither of them went to Harvard, where that was kind of like, my son who got into Yale, but went to Harvard, or got into Harvard, but went to Yale. And the fact that that is considered a different, to my mind, a different class of education. It should not be that way. But I just wonder how people feel about the contrast between Harvard and Howard. Why couldn't anybody be able to, well, getting to Harvard is really hard. But anyway, it was just something that really struck me, is the Howard and Harvard. And it's, again, thinking about the friend who posted to Facebook, someone I traveled to Peru with, saying, where do we get our clout? We don't have any clout. And thinking, well, maybe this is where clout comes from. I do not know. This is a very gemisch to pickle, as my mother would say, observation. But it does make me kind of wonder, you know, how people really feel about that. And I'm going to unmute.
Sharon?
So I read this book a while ago, and I don't remember all the details. I'm going to be real honest, and I've read a few other books and I get confused, but I'm just gonna, my daughter's college roommate went to Howard for medical school. She could have gone other places, and that's what she chose. And I think Kamala's the same thing. You know, it's an excellent school, but it's also, and this is not in the book, but it's like a comfort level. And this young woman from Glenbrook South mentioned the same thing, that I've, you know, worked this whole time to fit in at school. Oh no, she was from Glenbrook North, to fit in at school. And I'm gonna go now where everybody kind of looks like me. And the same thing, like with us moving to I came from a very, a smaller town in central Illinois where it was very diverse. And then you move to somewhere like Highland Park where there's lots of people like you, and the comfort level versus the level of being an integrated society. And I know that at our local high school, Highland Park, we have a diverse population, but it's not necessarily where, you know, you have friends from other cultures or races, if we're going to talk about race. So, you know, the whole issue of Howard, there's this education level, but there's also this level of being with people that are like you, and you don't have to maybe work as hard to fit in. So I don't know, this has nothing to do with the book, but it's just something that popped, you know, you also is an issue.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Wendy?
So Tanny, in the spirit of being soft on people, hard on ideas, it's my understanding that Howard is a very highly acclaimed university, period. It so happens to be a university for Black students, and it is considered to be on the level of Harvard. So I can't agree with comments that it's a second-class education or any of those things. It's a very, very highly acclaimed, and someone like Kamala Harris, who hopefully will be, you know what, very soon. I just wanted to throw that, get that idea out there. It's not the main theme of the book, and we don't need to, stick with that, but I just wanted to be hard on that particular idea.
And I certainly didn't mean to infer that it's a wonderful school, I mean, at the same level as others, but people who choose that over going to another school of equal level.
In order to be with people who look like them, have that shared experience. I think of it, when I think about historically Black colleges. Oh, go ahead, Rabbi.
I relate to that the way some people relate to visiting Israel.
Yes.
It's true.
So I'm, being in Israel around Christmas time is such a joy in the sense of not feeling the Christmas on me the way I feel it here sometimes, right? That everything is, every song on the radio, every store you walk past is full of Christmas. There's a beautiful spiritual Christmas going on in Jerusalem, but it doesn't have that kind of, it's not sitting on me the way it does, to sort of give an example. I also just have to say something about Howard, that there are a few experiences over a lifetime that are really meaningful to me. Is my first job as a rabbi was in Washington, D.C., and there was a wonderful interfaith clergy association, and I met incredible faculty at the divinity school at Howard, and actually got to guest lecture in the Howard Divinity School on the history of Judaism, and to walk into a room and suddenly be faced with a class like none I had ever seen, was just this awakening moment for me, that goes back now 30 years, right? But that, it's just an extraordinary gift and an extraordinary moment in my life to be able to walk in and suddenly feel what it be like for others, right?
I'm so glad to know that. We'll have to have like a story share at some point.
One of these days we have to do that. We keep our paths keep crossing, Tanny, but not really get a chance.
Oh goodness, I that is so wonderful. And I think to Coach's point, when he's built up so many of these ways that you have to have your mask on, that you have to have your defenses up in every situation, and even in his own schools or walking around or in every aspect of his life before that at Howard, that was a place where those walls could fall. And so when you think about then your experience with learning, when all of these other parts of your brain can shut off for just a little bit, just your experience with being able to take in information. And then as he spoke to just he'd always been around a certain kind of person, and that just showed him all of the wonderful and beautiful diversity within the Black community. It's such a vivid part of the book. So I am conscious of our time. So we have our 7 minutes left, and I have a few other questions, but I'm just wondering for people as we finish off, are there any other just themes that you really would love for us to talk about, or parts of the book that you want to discuss with the group, or questions that the book has left you with? And Sasha, if you haven't gotten to share yet, we would love to hear from you. Barbara, hi.
Okay, so I've been listening and I've done a lot of reading lately. And I think it's important that we all improve our understanding of other people and people around us that generally we don't share this information with. But this is such a distressing time, and I really can't imagine how things are going to change. I mean, on a big level, not on an individual. And an individual level, it's difficult enough because you have to be willing to hear what's going on. And then you have to be around people that it's going to make a difference for. And of course, right now, like I'm not around anybody except my husband and Zoom. But how is the country going to change? I don't know. It's gotten worse, and things are going to have to change from the top down. It's just really distressing to think about.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara. Sue, would you like to share?
Okay, so I don't want to share that view. I think things are changing. I think things are starting to change with young children. The young children don't see color. When they start school, they don't see color.
They see, and then you can certainly continue. I think they see color. They don't see race. They don't see racism.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Make this, yeah. Okay, so, hey, I think you can start there. I think on an adult level, there is such a heightened awareness that corporations, organizations, across the board is doing diversity training, is making is making conversations, meaningful conversations, is validating all of their employees or co-workers or, expanded, the feelings and the experiences, and it is becoming more and more and more part of the conversation continually. And that's how change is going to be affected. It would help if we got leadership from the top, but sometimes it is the populace that will drive the change. And I think that that's the way that we're going to achieve it now. So I'm very hopeful. And the more we can do, and that's why I was so interested in this, the more we can do, the more voices we can hear, the more teaching that we can take into and pass on. That's what's going to affect the change. What affected the change in the 60s was the populace. So it didn't come from the top down, it came from the bottom up. As far as the war. Okay, so I really am hopeful, and I think that all of us together, multiplied by millions of people, that is going to effectuate the change.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. And
really hopeful and great words. Tani prepared so much for us tonight, and I'm going to share in the chat a Google Doc that has questions that you can go look at it. You can just click on it. I couldn't think of the word click. You can just click on it now and look at it later. And I have a quick poll for you.
Ooh.
Oh, not this one. Wait a minute. It'll like.
I didn't know you could do polls in Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
I figured at like
Oh
this
my
point in
God.
Zoom, I knew it all.
Right. Well, I'm going to have. Yeah, you'll get it. So here's a poll. And when more from our leader, would you have liked more of a presentation? And special thanks to Diane Zinman and to Wendy Rhodes that we said at the very beginning, as we started, when Tanny came in for MLK, that this was a marathon, not a sprint. And that we've been true to our words, and we've read books, we've seen movies, and we will continue to bring you different discussions and different ways to do this. So, and is there anything else I'm missing here?
If I could just add something quickly, Vanessa,
Sure.
all of us are learning more on Zoom. So the question about, did you think this was helpful? This isn't the same as a traditional book group where 8 of us would get around a circle, we'd be in person, and it's easy to see everyone's facial expressions and everyone has a chance to talk. So, please answer that sincerely. Maybe Zoom for a book group is even more effective if we hear more from the leader than the participants. We don't know. Tanny is obviously a font of huge information and could have gone off in many dimensions on this book. So please respond so we know how to shape subsequent book clubs. Thanks.
I see some people have to sign off. It is 8 o'clock. I just want to remind that classes started back up this week, and special thanks to Tanny. She's fabulous. If you have any questions for her, I can get you her email address, which I can't get to very quickly right now. And so Rabbi, we did actually Gentleman's Agreement today, the movie. He's doing real classics. And I didn't want to bring it up because it would have taken us off topic, but I just thought it was really great bookends today. Gentleman's Agreements about anti-Semitism, the Anti-Racist Book Club. So proud of Macomb Soleil Lakeside. And I just look forward to gathering again in the future.
Thank you, Tanny.
Having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful
Thank
discussion.
you so much.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tanny.
Thank you. Wonderful as
Bye.
always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Tanny.
Bye.